Welcome to everyone. We just finished having a really good discussion about networks, and we want to take it to the next step, and that is talking about the platforms that obviously depend on those networks. So we're going to dedicate the next 45 minutes or so to that topic, and I'd like to, just as we did with the last group, just go down the line and ask everyone to introduce him or herself so that you know who he or she is. If we could start right here. I think we know who you are, but we'll let you do it again anyway.
Yeah, hello again. I'm a founder and member of the board of Fabasoft. We are a cloud service provider doing European cloud, and I'm working in the Cloud Select industry group for the code of conduct in the drafting team.
Hello, my name is Karl-Heinz Streibich. I am the CEO of Software AG, company based located in Germany, but the major business is outside Germany. About 85% is worldwide. We have about 4,500 employees, about 1 billion in revenue. Our digital platform and middleware are our focus products.
Very good.
Martina Koederitz, I'm the General Manager, IBM Germany, Switzerland and Austria.
Good.
Sabine, Bendiek, I'm running Microsoft Germany.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wendy, I'm a professor of computer science and web science at the University of Southampton, and I'm also here as chair of the ACM Europe Council. The ACM Association of Computing Machinery represents a lot of the world's leading computer science researchers.
Good afternoon, I'm David Martin. I'm a senior legal officer at BEUC, the European Consumer Organization.
Very good. And Herr Oettinger, Sie sind schon bekannt.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We want to take the first chunk of time here and hear from the business community about what their assessment is of the world of platforms in this digital single market. We'd like to hear from all of you, and then we're going to ask Mr. Oettinger to give his response on that. We understand, too, that he is tight on time. He's going to have to leave after we do that. So let's start, if we could, with you, Helmut. And just you've prepared a short presentation or a statement about platforms moving forward in the single digital market.
Yeah, I think I shortened that very much and give you an example of where we could do really well as a platform and we don't.
Okay.
Yeah? Now, in our board, Leo Bonf and myself founded Fabasoft, and we're both acting on board. And Leo's driving a Tesla, and he, by software upgrade, got more or less the first bits of autonomous driving. I drive a Mercedes, and my Mercedes is 1 year old. And the new E-Class gets bits of autonomous driving, and my S-Class doesn't. Why? Because there is no software updates, and that's not a platform. Yeah? So we need to learn how in Industry 4.0 and in the Internet of Things, we really understand that cars of the future are computers on wheels, and computers need updates. I want to have those features without having to buy a new car. Mm-hmm. So, right? Very short.
Okay, short and sweet, okay.
Martin.
Yes.
We all know that the digital economy is a shared economy. Mm-hmm. This is the basis of everything. The internet is shared, the cloud applications are shared, and so on. The digital disruptors, those that we call the company that disrupt entire industries, they are based on a software platform. They are more or less a software company. And the third core statement out of that is they all come out of the United States, or almost all of them. And the reason is they have an economic ecosystem in the US with 350 million consumers in a homogeneous market. We in Europe, we are segmented into 28 languages, 30 legal systems. We don't have a home basis to scale. Therefore, our grounds here in Europe are not fostering, they are even preventing a global player from that point of view. There might be one or the other exception, but it's not the rule. Therefore, what we need is a homogeneous European market with the same rules that we have a marketplace with 350 or 400 million consumers where we can scale and where we have the fertile grounds where similar platform-based digital disruptors are created and grow as we see in the United States. I think this is a core task of the European community in enabling Europe, based on its history, in providing us homogeneous surroundings, parameters, and the ecosystem to grow.
I just want to say that's a very strong statement. You think that the single digital market will allow Europe to overcome the other barriers that you say has actually prevented it from becoming a global player. So you think that's the key, the single digital market?
I trust very much in the entrepreneurship of European people. High level of education, high standard of living, great entrepreneurship and innovation. Once we have the same homogeneous environment and not the fragmentation, we have it in the languages, but English is the Esperanto of business, so that is not the problem. It is those different legal systems with different rules on everything that prevents us on having that scalable, unified market as we see it in the United States. This is now from a Europe's point of view.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, so let me put it this way. We believe that the digital single market is an exciting opportunity to really talk about positive aspects of platform, cloud, and data. And we also believe that this strategy will help to unlock the huge potential that exists in Europe in the digital transformation for societies, for governments, and for all industries. Therefore, we as IBM are really in strong support in the engagement of the Commission. The second topic is we really believe and are convinced that it's crucial for the success of a digital single market that this market remains an open market, because the digital economy is global by essence, so it's really important that we rely on the opportunity for international flows of data and cross-border services. And last but not least, we believe if we regulate platforms, we will create obstacles to develop new services in Europe. And so we believe the Commission should make full use of existing legislation, including competition rules, instead of creating new ones for the platform discussion.
Okay. So no new regulations. All right, thank you. Okay.
All right. I could probably stop after echoing everybody else saying how important it is that we actually have developed that vision of a single digital European market. I'd like to stress one thing in addition, or actually a couple of things in addition to that, though. I think starting with a European market is a great thing. If we're honest, technology is global in essence, and it's hard to stop that. So therefore, I think we will need to think about global standards actually as the next thing, so global alignment as the next thing. If I look at sort of the growth platform, so we talked about platforms, and if I look at the growth platform for Europe for the future, we believe that the Internet of Things, can be a key growth platform for Europe. The interesting one, of course, is that the Internet of Things isn't a sort of nicely defined term.
Right.
Lots of people think lots of different things about what it is, and if I would try to define it, it probably would be around, it's a deep integration between sensors, software, intelligent infrastructures, and industrial production. And the piece industrial production, obviously, is one of the reasons why we believe it's a major opportunity for Europe. The thing, of course, is that it's not enough to just enable your traditional businesses to really interact in a new way and drive digital transformation in the production. It's as important, actually, that public government actually embraces the same technologies and actually drives instead of slows technical innovation. So therefore, we believe that e-government, or better, digital public administration, is a key part of what we need to get right across Europe in order to be successful in driving innovation and growth coming out of Europe and for Europe.
Okay. Dame Wendy.
Well, because I'm not from industry, I'm a researcher, so I can't give an
We're
industry
still letting you.
perspective. Is that okay?
Yes, we're letting you in
So
anyway.
I walk in here today and I'm talking here about a digital single market. There isn't one PowerPoint in this room where I could plug my computer in or my phone in to get a charge. Right? Where's the digital in this? And passwords. I had to get a new, very long password, which will only be existence for today, that clogs up all my systems. Everywhere I go, I have to get another password. Where's the universal password for us getting onto the Wi-Fi? Where are the things that are fundamental? Right? We're talking about the future, but we haven't got the current right yet. However, I'm very positive about the digital. I'm a little more skeptical about the European single market because digital is global and because I don't see here anything. What drives people to use the digital are the companies that aren't represented here, which are the social networking companies and the things that have been driven by people. We aren't consumers in that world. We are part of it. We put the content on. That's what makes these amazing companies grow. And, you know, it's not just because of the big US market that they grew. It's also the investment. So I would like to turn some of the questions round.
Okay.
I'd also like to say two more things. One is that I would like Europe to look at what Martha Lane Fox is doing in the UK with .everyone, which is all about getting everybody involved in the digital in terms of being entrepreneurial, more women involved, of course, but just actually making it available for everybody. And part of that is something that the ACM is leading on very much, which is the idea of computing for everyone, changing education away from the dreadful ICT curriculums to computing for all. I think that's absolute, and that's the last of your list of points. I would make it the first.
Okay. Well, that actually takes us right to Mr. Oettinger. I think we're on time.
No, but
Well, we were going to. You can, sure.
oh, I don't know who.
I'm just following. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, from a consumer perspective, I have to say that platforms are very important as they provide a fantastic access point for consumers to all sorts of services and content. And they can empower consumer, they widen consumer choice as well. The problems we have as well come from different points of view. Three things: it's competition issues. You see some platforms that gain a lot of power very quickly and can quickly become gatekeepers to the internet. We also have concerns about privacy. Consumers, I heard about data ownership in the previous panel, but about profiling and the monetization of users when we talk about the so-called free model, which is not really free, but not all consumers understand that. And we also have problems in terms of compliance with the actual consumer law. We see a lot of unfair terms out there, for example, on mobile apps, lack of transparency in terms of how these platforms operate, what are the business models. And we think that all those things need to be taken into account as well. Talking about platforms in a general perspective, maybe it's a bit too much. First, you need to look at how you can deal with these platforms with existing tools and consumer law acquis, and then see where you can fill in the gaps.
Okay. So we've heard what everyone's initial statements and their take on platforms, network society, moving towards this single digital market. Herr Oettinger, what would you like to add to that?
Just a few remarks, because I could take note of all of these relevant interventions. Scalability. No doubt in the digital sector, services, applications need a number of contracting partners, that need a relevant market. And so the digital single market, one of our main arguments is to have 510 million people, plus additional people coming from neighbor states in Europe. And so being more attractive for investors, for service providers staying here in a competition to the American market. I like the US, but it's clear, 330 million people, it's more attractive for the moment than 500,000 in Luxembourg, 81 million in Germany, 2.2 million in Latvia, and so on. We have it if we scale it. Second point, one of our main ambitions is to contribute to the accelerated take-up of digital cloud services and usage of digital platforms by SMEs. My concern is not Mercedes or Philips. My concern is a typical SME being really competitive in an offline past and thinking it's not relevant for him, maybe for his son or his daughter in 5 or 10 years' time. Yeah. And to lose next 5 up to 10 years means to be a part of a disruptive element. So to integrate SMEs and to send out clear signals of trust and confidence, looking to online platforms, looking to cloud services is key. So we need the chambers of commerce. We need important associations as his association is for to send out clear expectations to us, but to inform members of his association or members of a chamber of commerce in the best manner and to bring them to digital services, to online platforms and so on. Namely, in my home country, Germany, we have an economy which is mainly an SME economy. Here it's more relevant maybe than in France, but it's relevant for the whole European Union. And last point, speed of innovation. You mentioned Mercedes and your S-Class. Engineers are developing a car all 7 years. The life cycle of a car means 6, 7, 8 years. For design, it's okay. For the engine, it's okay. For emission tools, it's okay. But digital innovation means to have a life cycle of 1 year at most, or of 1 day. So we need a new thinking in our development departments, by our OEMs and our suppliers. The digital innovation is much faster than the innovation of engineering products in general. And last point, DSM, in these years of new nationalism and populism, the digital union maybe could be a clear argument for our European Union. And we have convincing arguments. So we have to fight to come to a digital single market beyond nationalism, but as a win-win factor for all member states and all of our European customers.
Let me ask you just one question off script, Mr. Oettinger, but it's an excellent point you make. The digital single market, would you say that it may actually be the element that could save the European Union moving forward?
It's not the one and only element, but a clear and important element, namely for young people. I think being 18, 20 years old, living in a global digital environment, is a clear advantage to have a European strategy and to have 28 fragmented silos and no strategy.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on with the discussion now, and let's pick up a little bit on what was said about regulation. Herr Oettinger, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We've got Gerard is back here with the Commission to talk a little bit more, to continue the discussion. Let's speak a bit on this notion, though, of regulation that was mentioned. And can regulation, can it be good or can it be bad for platforms? Who wants to take a stab at that?
I'd like to come back on what Oettinger just said in his last statement. He was referring to the big opportunity of the digital single market really building a united Europe, as I call it always, the United States of Europe.
You're right.
Yeah, and that's true. But we have to face that a big political failure has built the fiefdoms in the 28 member states, being the frequency auctions, because of politicians being after the money of the mobile companies. What we have got is roaming fees. Yeah, we're getting rid of roaming now,
right.
But it's also important to build the digital single market means to really think in terms of uniting Europe instead of building new silos. And because we have built those silos in the virtual world ourselves. We have built the fences. We have built the roaming fees. This is simply a political failure.
Is it? Well, that's a little bit off topic, but it's a great topic.
It was referring to his last statement.
To his last statement.
And you know, it has to do with platforms in the sense that the first platform on this planet in the digital world was the GSM platform.
Yes.
And we were leading in GSM. We were leading in 2G, and then we lost track on 3G and 4G. And now, hopefully, we will be back in 5G.
But do you want to put all the blame, though, on the political players in this? I mean, the companies, particularly the telecoms in this, they made a lot of money, too, with the way this system is now. I mean, it wasn't just the politicians who were making money, right?
They had, you know, they could have taken the money to innovate, or they could have taken the money to send the money to the state. And the state, the politicians had decided to take the money away from innovation and into the state's money. And I think there is a clear political failure in the past, and we need to make sure that we overcome that in the digital single market, get rid of roaming, get rid of silly frequency auctions, and really make sure that we unite Europe in the digital economy.
Let me ask David, what about with the consumer in all of this? I mean, he's basically saying that the EU, the political actors, they've let down the consumers. You agree with that?
I don't think it's only the EU that is to blame, to be honest. If Mercedes doesn't want to update your car, probably it's not because the politicians don't allow them to update your car. I think that it's a bit more complicated than that.
I didn't say the EU. It was
the politicians.
It was the politicians
in the
member
states.
states.
Blame a little bit, and companies as well. From a consumer perspective, your question was regulation or not regulation. Usually, from a consumer perspective, since the consumer is a weaker party in this game, let's say, usually you do need regulation, and you cannot let just the market regulate itself, for example, on something like privacy. If you don't have strong privacy rules that set the foundations for how this industry needs to develop, it's clear that they're going to be crossing some boundaries they shouldn't be crossing. Do we need general regulation for platforms? Personally, platforms are very different one from another. It's hard to put all of them in one single box. So, and also there's already rules that apply to all these types of platforms. That's why my point was, first of all, you need to look at how these rules are applying, make sure that you are enforcing properly all these rules, and then see if you need to review them or you need additional legislation to deal with some of the problems that you identify.
Tim, what do you make of this notion that the state or political leaders have let us down?
Well, that's a whole, yes, of course they have. In everything, but that's another whole issue. I wanted to just make the difference between regulations and standards.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's very important that you decide, we understand where we need regulations and where we need standards. And I think also we have to remember that a lot of this has been driven by open standards. And I'm not saying open standards are applicable everywhere, but as we go towards the Internet of Things, the one thing I like to say about the Internet of Things, it is not yet an internet. Right? At the moment, it is things talking to bits of the internet, silos. It's very, very siloed. Now, the web, the internet on which the web's built, run on the network effect because they're open. Anyone can get involved and it doesn't cost anything. You know, it didn't cost anything. It was all given away for free, and that's what drove it. The Internet of Things can't be given away because you need some regulation. You've got to build things. You've got to test things. It's a very different type of market. But at the moment, actually, the saving grace is it is silos. Because if we had an open Internet of Things where anything could talk to any other thing, without regulation, you've got a huge problem. So this is something we've absolutely got to get to grips with going forward, and this is the role that governments can play. And I totally agree that a scalable market and a driving force like the EU can really help with that in a global world. I mean, this has got to be, and it's got, I mean, I'm on the Global Commission for Internet Governance, and our big a report that's going to come out soon is all about a social compact between companies, governments, and people. People are huge players in this. We aren't just consumers. We are part of the machine that we're building here. And it's so important that we sort out when you make a law, when you regulate for privacy, security issues, and when you need to agree open and global standards.
The notion, too, that Mr. Oettinger mentioned of the digital single market being, he didn't say it was going to be a panacea for all of Europe's problems, but he said it was definitely a unifier. How does that sound to someone coming from the United Kingdom just a few months away from a Brexit referendum?
You want my honest opinion?
Yeah, tell the truth.
I'd vote, it would make me more inclined to vote out.
You would want to vote out?
It would make me more inclined to vote out.
A digital single market?
Because I don't want to see it in a European context. I want a digital market, a global market. I mean, you know, I travel all over the world. I don't just travel in Europe. So I want my phone, my passwords, my devices to work all over the world. I want to be able to get to the cloud wherever I am in the world, not just when I'm in Europe. So you convince me that will happen, then I'm fine about it. But if you're going to stop me doing that, I don't want that. So I have to understand more about what it means.
Well, do you think is the notion then that, or do the British understand the digital single market as being a type of fortress around Europe?
I don't know. I can't speak for the whole of Britain.
Okay.
But it's very emotional at the moment, how people feel about this. I think people's emotions are different to what the head says sometimes, and you know, you may find people will vote in because it's safer, but I think this, I don't know what the digital single market means. Right? I've read it. I don't know what it's going to mean, and it depends how it evolves. If it is driving me into a better digital world as a global citizen, I'm fine with it. If it's going to put up barriers between me and the rest of the world, I'm not so happy with it.
Well, Mr. de Graaf, what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, we need to get our act together in Europe. I mean, we have 28 fragmented systems, 28 different legal systems. I mean, we had roaming, we still have roaming, we have different data protection regulations, we have different copyright rules, etc. I mean, if we want to be taken seriously in this global world, and we're going to create a framework that is indeed global, I mean, Europe needs to have a single voice. We will not be taken seriously by anybody around the world if we come with 20 different responses on dozens of different topics. So we're not, I mean, the digital single market is not a barrier to the rest of the world. It is an opening to the rest of the world. I mean, it's going to be much easier for companies that come to Europe to deal with a single set of rules than it is to deal with 28 rules. But the more important thing is it will be much easier for European companies, and particularly the startups we've talked about today, and the SMEs who don't have the capacity to familiarize themselves or hire legal advice and spend tens of thousands of euros to figure out how you'd need to do business in other member states. So this gives us the opportunity to have companies that are actually global and not just to be totally dependent on companies that come into the European Union with the advantage of scale, and then of course have a major competitive advantage compared to the companies that are denied that scale in the European Union.
What would you say are the, let me ask industry too, let me ask you, what are the biggest barriers right now to the digital single market, and when we're talking about platforms? What would you say would be the biggest barrier right now?
Well, I mean, in terms of developing a single digital market, honestly, it's really us getting our things together. But in terms of really adopting it, I think there's one thing that also Mr. Oettinger, sort of hinted at, which is the trust issue. Trust is probably the single biggest barrier of having a lot of the small and medium enterprises adopting.
Trust between.
No, just to trust that adopting cloud, for instance, adopting digital transformation, the Internet of Things, this whole issue around what happens to the data, how safe is it? That's what I mean. So, and if you look at trust, I think, people tend to look at it as a soft issue. If you change perspective, you can very well actually define it as a hard issue, as a hard multifold challenge, actually. And if you break it down, one piece is security. So technical security, how safe is it? How controlled is it? What's happening to my data? The second piece clearly is around data sovereignty for the owner of the data. Can I really determine who's going to be seeing that data? Can I determine when that data is going to leave wherever it's stored? And I think the third piece is actually coherent legal rules, across a variety of countries, and not country by country, asking yourself as a multinational company or as a company that's actually dealing with customers in many different locations, what it is that you have to be compliant to. And therefore, if you look at trust, I think trust is clearly something, if you break it down in those three factors, where, public policy and regulation can play a very important, role, but also where companies actually have to play a very important role, right? And we need to get our act together to make that happen. And if we define the single digital market as something that's really focused on providing the right guidelines for that, knowing that technology moves at a very fast pace, which means you can't really regulate technical details. You shouldn't regulate technical details, because by the time political consensus actually, is reached, technology has moved on, and it has moved on big time. Right? So therefore, you have to be very clear about what you're trying to regulate, and it has to be around sort of the data and the usage of data and the rights that people have.
Yeah, who has what right to do what with my data?
Exactly. And that is the piece that we need to focus on, and we managed to get that done. I think there's a huge opportunity, and then it's also not the fortress, then it's something that's going to help you to be successful in the global context of the digital economy.
I mean, that is an issue that in all of the panel discussions today, that one issue has come up in every one. And no one really has an answer for it, because maybe it is something that is still in a process of being created. We don't exactly know who we can trust to do what with our information. That's what I've been hearing throughout the day. But it's interesting that it keeps coming up. What about the people at IBM?
There are so many points already mentioned, but let me take two. I think it's absolutely correct. What is the difference between rules, standards, and regulation?
Right.
How can we use existing legislation if we want to prevent or protect something? There's an ongoing question: who owns the data? And then the third dimension is really, because we are in a global economy, and also SMEs, as Minister Oettinger mentioned, most of the German SMEs are part of a global, large supplier value network.
That's right.
So they are already working in a global network at all. And so we need to find the better way, what we really want to solve for them. Is it the adaptation? Is it the skill? Is it the knowledge? And then finally, I think sometimes in the discussion we are trying to fix everything with the same thing, because we have a consumer-oriented discussion and we have a B2B-oriented discussion, and I personally believe you cannot find rules which is solving the consumer dimension as well as the B2B dimension. Yeah? So for example, IBM, we are truly in the B2B, we are working with different people who are using our service, and for me this distinction is relevant as well, and starts, how do we build up the knowledge in a digital society, in schools and education, academy, because we want to have people who are, how do you say, mature enough to participate in a digital society and in a digital world.
Sure.
I fully agree. We must differentiate between the business-to-business digital discussion and the consumer digital discussion. What you said from a British point of view, this is very much true for the consumer side. You know, when I'm in Germany, in the UK, or in the US, or somewhere else, I want to have one standard. I don't want to worry, is it now a special mail system only relevant for Germany, or for Europe, or for someone else? This is the consumer view. The business-to-business view, we all know, for example, Europe has a lot of industries. And there it is key that the industrialization of Europe follows the next wave of innovation. And the next wave of innovation is the digital innovation. Only then will we be able in Europe to maintain our standard of living. Not our standard of living, this is safe, but the ones of our kids and grandkids. What we are living from is the innovation of our grandfathers and grandmothers and fathers and mothers. They achieved that we are a fully industrialized Europe. But we, out of the IT space, we must help, and I only speak about the business-to-business side now, we must help that the industrialization follows the digital paradigm. Only then will it be possible that the standard of living will further evolve in Europe. And there it is logic and obvious that we have a conflict of interest. Those industrial companies which are home-based in Europe, they want that the European home-based industrial companies flourish. And those who are already a world market leader outside Europe, they want to flourish as well. That means it is almost a natural competition on the business-to-business side. But that's okay. Europe is used to have the competition. And therefore, I say it must be a discussion covering business-to-business, and it must be a discussion covering the pure consumer side. What we have seen up to now in the Internet is 99% the Internet of the consumers. But the future for the industrialized Europe will be the Internet of the industries. Mm-hmm. And that's a complete different discussion with different egoisms. And therefore, we have to separate the discussion.
Yep. Very good point. Very good point. Helmut, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think we should not only be a world leader in digital concepts, but also in the commercial exploitation. And that is what the digital single market is all about. And if you ask me what the three main topics of bringing cloud computing forward are, then I would say it's trust, it's interoperability, and it's infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And I want to give you two examples of where infrastructure sucks in Austria, just as an example. Okay. My kids go to high school. This high school has 23 megabit per second for 1,500 school children. Yeah, it's impossible to do work with the whole class. It simply doesn't work. They're trying to get more bandwidth now. Second example, we tried to establish our cloud first in Linz. Now, the latency time from Linz to Frankfurt is 27 milliseconds. The latency time from Nuremberg to Frankfurt is 3 milliseconds. Okay. That's a factor of 10. Yeah. And that's the difference if you can build a cloud or you can't. Yeah. So, and Linz isn't a rural area. Mm. Yeah. So there is lots of work ahead, but I really believe in the digital single market. We depend on it for the future of Europe. As I said before in the morning, I believe it is as important as the euro and Schengen, and there is no way not doing it.
Yep.
I think we have to be clear about what the responsibility is of policymakers and regulators, and we need to provide a predictable, forward-looking framework. It's the rules of the game in a way, and then it's up to the businesses to compete, and there'll be disruption, and some will win and others will lose and new ones will emerge. Our role is not to pick winners. We have to put in place a regulatory framework that works. And I think if we're smart about the regulatory framework, we can actually gain a competitive advantage through the regulatory framework. I mean, we talk a lot about data protection. We talk a lot about cybersecurity, and we talk about trust. I mean, if we can turn these kind of regulatory instruments to our advantage, so Europe is the gold standard. If you place your data in a European cloud, certified, you can sleep well. Your data will be secure, your personal data will be protected. It's going to be protected very well against hackers. I think we need to look at regulation from that perspective. I mean, we have an e-identity and e-authentication regulation in Europe, which is excellent. I mean, you talk to people around the world, they say, really, this is really good. This is the equivalent of, say, physical identification. And so this can make e-government services and banking can all make it much easier. If we use this regulation to build all kind of applications on top, we can gain leadership. We can make our processes much more efficient. And I think that's what we really need to look for. This is not like, well, there's something that moves out there and it's called platforms. Let's see how we can regulate it. Of course, if there's a problem, I mean, we should think about regulatory solutions if they're around. I mean, first of all, platforms are regulated. The data protection rules, the consumer protection rules, I mean, contract law or taxation applies to platforms operating in Europe, so they're not operating in a legal vacuum. We need to look at some of the level playing field issues. Some of our companies, like telcos, have quite far-reaching obligations to, for example, protect e-privacy, because they hold a lot of personal data that they collect. The same does not apply to platforms, which surely have as much, if not more, personal data about the consumer. So what about a level playing field? Do we need to regulate up maybe at the level of the platforms? Do we need to regulate down at the level of the telcos, which are currently under that regime? But always from the perspective like, is there a problem? Is there a problem that needs intervention? Can the industry solve it itself? We see a lot of very positive self-regulatory initiatives. And in a fast-moving market, that should certainly be the kind of the first thing to look at. But there may be situations where regulatory solutions are necessary. Then we need to look, is it at the European level that these regulatory solutions need to be taken? Is it at the national level? Well, because the scope of digital, it will mostly be at the European Union level. But it is always with a view to making sure that there is a level playing field, there is a regulatory environment that induces innovation, that allows competition to take place on fair terms, and then it's up to the business community to show who has the best ideas, who can be the most disruptive, and who will be the most successful in the European market, and then from the European market in the global market.
I just want to make a couple of comments. The first one on the question about data ownership, and from a consumer perspective, the starting point is very clear. It's like data, personal data I generate, it's mine, and there's no question about it. Of course, it's much more complicated than that afterwards.
Why are you laughing?
I wish it was. I mean, you can say that as much as you want, but it's certainly not that clear at the moment.
I said the starting point. I know it's much more complicated than that, but we do need to look at those issues when you're talking about the Internet of Things. With more and more personal data is going to be generated and shared, and you don't have control over it. And it's just an example of this kind of data. Today there are applications on your mobile phone that grant themselves perpetual sub-licensable worldwide licenses of the data that you generate, and that goes far beyond the line. They say pictures, for example, are user-generated data. I would say that's personal data, and I don't like giving them a license to do whatever they want with my pictures without even realizing I'm doing so. That's a point about data ownership. And then about the level playing field and what the digital single market looks for consumers. There we look at two things. The first one is a market that has no artificial barriers, things like geo-blocking, for example. And the second thing, the level playing field. We hear a lot about that from the industry perspective. What we want is a level playing field of consumer protection. It doesn't matter what kind of services they're using or what kind of platforms they're using, there has to be a high level of protection. And we talk about regulating or deregulating. The level of protection shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be there. It should be up here, you know? It's not like the telco should be regulated to meet the platforms. It's rather the other way around, in our opinion.
We are almost at the end of our time. Something that has come up in all of the discussions today has also been the role of the consumer or the user, the end user, and their knowledge of what it is actually that they're doing with networks or with platforms. And I mean, it gets back to what you say, do we really know who owns our information? Well, should we maybe not be talking about educating people to be sophisticated consumers and users? Is that something we're forgetting in this?
Can I check?
Go ahead, Dave.
The rhetoric. We're not consumers in this world.
Okay.
We're generators, all right? We do buy things, but we also generate data. So we aren't just consumers and users. We are part of the machine.
Well, like on
we put data into it. So we have to be part of this compact. I'm struggling with what a European cloud means. Thought that was a very interesting phrase, because to me, I look at the people that run cloud services and I think, well, does it matter where the servers sit? What defines a European cloud? You know, is it the person who's using the services, or the person who's generating the services, or the company that's regulating where the servers are in Taiwan or whatever? I've forgotten where I was going with that one now. I was just going to give an anecdotal story, which was I'm an Apple user. You can tell that because I have an iPhone, and I buy things, music to put in from iTunes to put on my phone. And the other day I'm driving along, I get a ping on my watch, the music stopped because it wants me to log into iTunes. Why? I thought I'd bought that music, I thought it was on my phone, mine to do what I like with. No, the rules have changed because of the terms and conditions I signed. That's not my music, it turns out. And it wanted me to log into iTunes while I'm driving along, I should add. And it's sort of, I have no idea, right? I don't read those terms and conditions. And if the digital single market can sort out the problems of terms and conditions, that would be wonderful, because that is a really big problem.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean with becoming a more sophisticated actor. Then I won't use the word user, because you're right. We produce content all the time, but I mean, no one reads all of those rules and regulations. But maybe it is part of the single digital market. Maybe that could be a suggestion to simplify that. That would be.
Because you really do have to know where your data is. It is your data, but it isn't your data. I mean, wish it was. And it's stored somewhere in the planet, and possibly in the future it won't even be stored on the planet.
Well, I mean, for example, let's say we were to take a selfie, right? Of sitting up here, I take a selfie and I put it on Instagram, right? Who owns that?
I have no idea.
Should be yours. That's my point of view.
But if I'm in it, can I?
It should be mine, but it's on Instagram, and everyone out here can look at it. They can comment on it. They can copy it. They can put it on their Instagram profile. So, isn't it? It's almost. Are we entering an era? And that's going to be the closing word, because the Swiss are coming and they want us to be on time. The notion of ownership. Jeremy Rifkin was here last year, and he said capitalism is giving birth to something, the sharing economy. Right? To what? To unemployment. What? No, but he said it's giving birth to something, and the notion of ownership as we know it today may actually be dying. That's a thought maybe we can take with us. We're running out of time, though. Okay, one question, and then we have to go. Well, you need a microphone. Is there a microphone for this gentleman? Or maybe we can give him the one here from Mr. de Graaf.
Being educated.
Thank you.
Alone.
A selfie has the same copyrights like any other photo. You have people on it, and you have to discuss before where it shall be published. And you can, in principle, have the copyrights not made, let's say, by social networks like Facebook or Twitter, but they are ground rights, and they have, let's say, with Oettinger to be discussed from the European Union Council. It is not to be a Facebook selfie, but it has to be, let's say, a normal photo like any other photo there was before.
Okay, so it would belong to me and no one else.
Okay.
And they have to ask permission then if they repost it. Well, no one ever asked me permission for that. We could talk a long time. Okay, one question here, and that's going to have to be it, or else the Swiss will come get us. Microphone. Yeah.
Thanks for the
Okay, go ahead.
Very quick question. 1 million jobs are vacant due to the lack of skills in Europe. By 2020, 80 million jobs will be vacant. At the same time, 97 million persons will have their skills obsolete. I'm the founder of Cross-Border Talents. Our mission is to recruit, train, and employ 500,000 developers. It's not wishful thinking because the colleagues from the European Commission see us as an SME instrument champion, so we are now being funded for that. I have 3 of my clients at the stage. I just need a brief comment. How are you accelerating digitalization knowledge? Because otherwise, Wendy is right, because it was really a trouble to get in here because of all the passwords and all the tricky stuff.
Said, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we'll work on the passwords for next year. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause. It was a very good discussion. Thank you.